seconds. 3, 1. Okay, everybody. Good evening, and I'll call this meeting to order. It's the November 8th City Council meeting, and we are a little short-staffed with council tonight. I'm at home because I've got this cold, so I decided to stay here, and we have Councillors Desmarais and Beauregard off with a cold, and Councillor Kalaleff, who's off with a medical operation that she had, so she'll be off for a little bit. At this time, if we could call on Brandon to play O Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, to be true love in all of us command. Quand on va se porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Dans l'histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep my land glorious and free. Protègera nos foyers, c'est nos droits. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
And again, we thank the McKay Choir. So this time I'll read our land acknowledgement. Niagara region is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The City of Port Colborne stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We have one proclamation this evening. I'll have Councillors Bagu and Wells move that International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, November 25th, 2021, be proclaimed. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Adoption of the agenda. If I can have Councillors Bodner and Danch move the agenda. Is there any questions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Okay, none have been declared. Approval of the minutes. I'm going to do this in block, Council. I'm going to have Councillors Bodner and Bruno move regular meeting of Council October the 25th and Committee of the Whole Budget October 28th, 2021. Questions on either of those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Items pulled for discussion this evening. We have item 8.1. There is an amendment staff has asked to be read into that, so I will read that. 8.2, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5, 9.6, and 10.1. Those have all been moved. Is there any other items that needed to be pulled? Seeing none, if I can have Councillors Bagu and Wells move the remainder of the items. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Item 11 is presentations. We have one presentation this evening. Donna Harrington, the Harrington Group Limited, and Andrea Mamo, member of the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, the JAAC presentation to Municipal Councils 2021. Donna and Andrea, welcome this evening.
Steve? I got it, Joe.
Good evening. How are you, Andrea?
Not too bad. You?
Good, good. Are you leading this, or is Donna going to lead this?
I thought Donna was going to do an intro, but so she was going to be here and introduce Stephen Barker as well.
Okay,
But
there we are.
Hi, sorry about that. I had technical issues.
That's okay. Donna, welcome. Well, we can see you talking. Your mute's off, but we can't hear you. No, can't. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
okay, we'll go ahead. So we just wanted to give some history of the JAAC. In 2003, 6 municipalities came together to create the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee. The committee includes the town of Lincoln, the township of West Lincoln, the town of Pelham, the city of Thorold, the town of Niagara on the Lake, and the town of Grimsby. Next slide, please. In 2021, the committee expanded. We are now joined by the city of Port Colborne. We welcome Port Colborne and will assist the city to ensure compliance with the AODA. We will work to develop positive relationships within the local community. Next slide, please. Audits of municipal facilities, training modules for staff to ensure AODA compliance. Committee branding, we have a new logo, a community flag, and a Facebook page, which you will see on the next slide. And the next slide, please. We continue to promote our Accessibility Award. We use an audit checklist in each business. If the business scores 80% or higher, they receive the We Are Accessible Award. To date, 10 businesses have received the award throughout our catchment area. Next slide, please. Currently, 22% of the Canadian population has a disability. The deadline for full accessibility in the municipality is fast approaching. This means goods and services will need to be accessible, which includes customer service, information and communications, new facilities, and services. Next slide, please. We will continue to work with staff and council to ensure compliance with the AODA and are available to answer questions or concerns and to review site plans. We ask council to assist us in ensuring the municipality meets the 2025 deadlines. We ask council to promote our We Are Accessible Award to local businesses. We ask council to continue to communicate with us about their accessibility concerns and decisions. We thank you for the opportunity to present to council this evening.
Great, Andrea, thank you. And Andrea represents the city of Port Colborne. She has served on our committee in the past, and then when this committee was formed with the municipalities, as Andrea mentioned, it gives us a better partnership and a lot more ideas and different views from different municipalities on how things can work with regards to accessibility. So Andrea, both for you and Donna, we really appreciate this. Are there any questions today from council? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How would the average citizen get a hold of the committee? Do we have a link on our website, or do we have?
could-
Yeah,
Is
Andrew?
I didn't know if Donna was going to answer that question or not, but they could, if our citizens wanted to even contact me, or possibly Donna through her email even.
Okay. And Ron, we can have that. We'll make sure that if it's not already there, because I do apologize, I'm not.
Right.
Yeah. They are making changes to our website as every week moves on and we add and subtract things. So I'll make sure that staff knows through Scott, if there's Scott sitting in the council, if Scott can make sure the first floor gets that on when they're doing their website updates. Okay.
Yeah, it'd probably be best to go through Donna's because she has the Harrington group.
Yes. Yes. So what we'll do is we'll make sure all those contacts, but Andrew, we should show you because you are our representative. So if anybody has any direct questions or anything specifically to Port Colborne, we can, a lot of people rather deal with their local reps sometimes, but
Yeah,
if we could appreciate that, we would appreciate that.
yeah,
that's
that
good.
would be perfectly okay with me as well. Yes.
Good. Thanks, Andrea. Any further questions? Seeing none. Oh, Stephen, sorry, Stephen, your hand's up. I apologize. Oh, take your mute off. No, try it again. It's your mute's back on. There we go. Try that. No, we can see you talking, but we can't hear you. If you wished, you can send an email to my office or through Andrea to get us your comment or question. We'd appreciate that. Okay. All right. Any further questions, council? Great. Again, Donna, Andrea, and Stephen, we really appreciate you doing this for us. And, we'll work very hard with regards to your committee. And again, as you mentioned, Andrea, in what you put forward to us tonight, it's very important that when we're doing projects that we consult with you and your committee with regards to our accessibility issues that may be involved with those projects. So again, thank you.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know if you saw my hand or maybe my raised hand.
Oh, sorry, you have a question, Councilor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to, I'll say Andrea. Andrea, so if I'm understanding this correctly, so we're able to tap into, is it professional staff that knows a lot about that, and that's Donna?
That would be Donna. Okay. Yes, that's what Donna basically performs audits, which will go into, say, businesses, and to make sure that the checklist of accessibility is at 80%.
Very good. And so if we
then they would receive to say that, yes, you are accessible, because there may be places that right now may say they're accessible, but they're actually not AODA approved for accessibility.
So if a councillor or a municipality has a question, you also can do any research on that?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, later on, we have an item that speaks to road ends, which are really road allowances, and beach access. And some of the queries on that have been about handicapped people having access to our lakefront via road allowances. So if we were to ask Donna as a research project, so what have municipalities done in Ontario to help allow access to handicapped people through a road allowance or at a beach, we can partake of that knowledge.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Good. Thank you, Councilor Bruno, and thank you, Andrea.
Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay. Again, seeing none. Thank you again.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilor Bruno, could you just put your hand up again on your computer just so I can see it? There it is. Okay.
Up
Yeah.
now, you see it?
No, it goes on, then it goes off, then it goes on and off. Try it again.
Sure. I'll have to lower it because mine's showing raised now.
Yeah, I don't know. Other counselors, do you see how it disappears?
So
There
it's
you are
gone
now.
now, it's lowered.
So we're showing it as up. Okay, now
Now
it's
it's
lowered.
up.
Okay, no, yeah. So just speak out, Counselor Bruno, because it seems to be going on and off, and then it disappears. I see it now, so, okay, all right.
Thank you. Sure.
There are no delegations this evening, Council, and I'll move on to my mayor's report. So on October the 22nd, 2021, the Ontario government, in consultation with the Chief Medical Officer of Health, released a plan to safely reopen Ontario and manage COVID-19 for the long term. This plan, which can be viewed at www.ontario.ca, outlines increased capacity limits and the province's approach to lifting the remaining public health and workplace safety measures by March of 2022. Ensuring you get vaccinated is very important. Visit ontario.ca for vaccination locations. And remember that you must show proof of vaccination to enter certain businesses and recreation facilities. Please ensure you carry this with you. If you need assistance in getting a printed copy of your vaccination report, stop by the Port Colborne Public Library and they can assist you. At this time, it will be important for you to wear a mask and maintain social distancing. Staff are continuing to offer customer service support for residents, businesses, and visitors by phone, email, website, and social media channels. If you have questions in regards to City Hall services or would like to report a concern, you can contact a customer service representative Monday to Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. by calling 835-2900 or by email at customerservice@portcolborne.ca. Alternatively, you can visit our website, www.portcolborne.ca, and submit a service request or inquiry by clicking on the Request a Service tab located in the top right corner of our website page. A few weeks ago, we assigned our local elementary schools with a snowportant mission to paint our snowplows and artistically display their school pride. 5 schools, DeWitt Carter, St. Pat's, St. Therese, St. Joseph, and Oakwood, accepted the mission, and today I had the chance to see all of them and choose a snowplow as our winner to be on display in our upcoming Reverse Santa Claus Parade on Saturday, December the 4th at 6:30 p.m. at H.H. Knoll Lakeview Park. In addition to being on display in our community all winter long, brightening up our roadways, the winning school is, drum roll please, DeWitt Carter with their snow-breathing dragon. I love this one because they are the DeWitt Carter Dragons, and they really incorporated their school mascot and the project to come up with a great plow. I can't wait to see the plow in action this winter, and I also had a chance to surprise them today with their snow plow to share the news, and it was great to see their excitement. So we brought their class out in front of DeWitt, grade 7s and 8s, along with their principal. We had Cogeco TV there. We had our staff there taking photographs. So please watch out on Cogeco and our social media for some pictures. The runner-up was St. Patrick's Catholic Elementary School. I love this one because on the back of the plow, they actually wrote inspirational messages to our snowplow drivers that included, "Keep plowing through," and "You are important to us." So all of the schools did an amazing job, and I hope you keep your eyes open for them during our first snow event. We also want to thank Port Paint and Paper for providing the supplies to our schools. It is always great when we can partner with our community on projects like this. Last week, I had the opportunity to welcome another new business to Port Colborne. Steel and Clover Public House is fashioned after an Irish pub and restaurant and is located in the Porto Village Mall at the corner of Steel and Clally. And it's an area that has been lacking in a restaurant. So if you get an opportunity, please go check them out. 2021 marks the 100th anniversary of Remembrance Day, of the Remembrance Day poppy in Canada. A commemorative poppy was created, and this is the poppy we are wearing this evening. You'll see it all on all in our jackets or shirts. So in July of 2021, the Great War Veterans Association adopted the poppy as the flower of remembrance. To honor this milestone and to commemorate those who protected our freedom, the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum will have a poppy installation on the museum grounds until November the 11th. The museum worked in partnership with the Niagara Falls Museum Poppy Project to bring 2,021 hand-knit poppies to Port Colborne for this unique display. We're grateful to our neighboring museum and the volunteers who contributed to this project. I've been by there a number of times. It looks fantastic. So if you haven't seen it, folks, please go by our museum and take a look at it before this weekend. On November the 11th at 10:45 a.m., the Port Colborne Royal Canadian Legion will be hosting their Remembrance Day ceremony at the Cenotaph at H.H. Knoll Lakeview Park. For those unable to attend, the city has partnered with the Legion and WeeStream to provide a live stream of the ceremony beginning at 10:30 on the city's YouTube channel. So at this time, I would like to ask everyone to pause for a moment of silence in remembrance. Thank you, and take care and be safe. At this time, I'd like to call on Regional Councillor Barb Butters for the Regional Councillors Report. Good evening, Councillor. How are you?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. I'm glad to see you all here tonight, and I hope your cold gets better. Certainly before Thursday, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is getting better, Barb. Thank you.
Good. So a couple of updates. Wilhelm Road, there's still temporary closure continuing tomorrow till Friday, so November 9th to the 12th. Roadworks happening on Wilhelm between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So for anybody out that way, you can't use Wilhelm between Highway 3 to Forks Road East. Today's actually Indigenous Veterans Day, so we want to acknowledge the contribution of our Indigenous people to Canada's freedom and our way of life. This week, the standing committees meet, so tomorrow morning is Public Works, and in the afternoon, Public Health and Social Services, and Wednesday morning is Corporate, and in the afternoon, Planning and Economic Development. The next council meeting for the region is November 18th at 6:30, and the next budget review committee of the whole meeting is November 25th. So we have been busy with the budget, with the in terms of the committee of the whole meeting and budget review. So we've gone through the waste management piece, water and wastewater, and we did the police budget just the other night. So lots of stuff going on, lots of information that is sometimes a bit overwhelming and to absorb it all, but they really do their best to give us lots of time to prepare for these meetings. So let's see, I think that's it for me. I hope to see you all on November 11th up at the Cenotaph. I plan to be there, and looks like we're going to have really nice weather for it too, which is a bonus. And I think that's all I have for tonight.
Great, thank you, Barb. I do have Councillors Bagu and Bruno wanting to ask questions. I'll start with Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you, Barb. It's been a while. I did have on a council's concern this issue, but I figured it'd be better bring up to yourself and the mayor regarding Niagara Regional Transit, the on-demand system that's coming up. And I did talk to staff under my concern, and from what I'm getting, we need some more information from the region. and some paperwork and stuff like this. So just wondering if yourself and the mayor could talk to our staff, Director Bowles, and try and expedite the paperwork so we can get all the information out to our residents coming up.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to do that. I actually heard from another resident, and she lives in the seniors building on Steel Street. And so for some of the folks there, they were really worried when they heard that there was going to be no more bus, and was actually kind of panicking. So it's pretty obvious that we need to get information to our residents so that they're not panicking, they're not worrying, they will know what's in place and how to access it. So thank you for the question, Mark, and I'll get back to you on what you need.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Barb. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Actually been answered by Barb. I'd met with those seniors, if it's Kinnear Place, and gone over some stuff, and Brian Bowles was helpful, but same question they had about they're reading off the regional site, and it has stuff about Waynfleet. It doesn't have anything about Port, and the answer seemed to come back that they were told, well, the region wouldn't want to put it out until they get close to opening day, so that people either forget about the information. But I don't know. I find that you can't supply them with too much information, and the earlier the better. And if things change, I think we do that. Out of that conversation, and I don't know if this is for you or for Regional Councillor Butters, there's a lot of people that at the end of I don't know if our information campaign is going to include anything to the House, because as Barb probably recognized in that call, a lot of the calls they have are from seniors, and they're in apartment buildings, and they don't seem to have the same level of communication, whether it be by the city staff or if they're, if it's in Niagara this week, they don't get enough copies to the building. Sometimes it's a hit and miss. So I'm wondering, we might come up with the greatest communication piece, the region, but how are we getting it into each person's hand? I think that may be a topic for discussion for comms here and at the region.
Yeah, both Barbara and I can bring that forward, but I don't know if Mr. Bowles has anything to add to that on when when the final information comes down from the region. Brian, how you're going to disseminate that to the community?
Through the mayor to council, as soon as we get the information finalized with the region, they're putting together a communication plan. I know they're working diligently with their lawyers on a contract, and once we get that, we're happy as staff, and we'll be sharing that with council and getting it out to the community as soon as we have all those details.
Okay, anything to add, Barb?
Yeah, just that in terms of the seniors building on Steel Street, under Niagara Regional Housing, there's avenues there to help share information with certainly with the people that live there, and to make sure that we get out something on paper, because there's people in that building, and I know some have access and are computer savvy, and some are not. The other side of this is too that somebody had said to me that you need a credit card. Well, not everybody has a credit card, so these are some of the concerns that folks had, and we need to make sure that they get addressed and their concerns are put to rest, so that everybody has that access and equity to access this Niagara Regional Transit on demand. Because I think in the long run, it's going to be a really good thing for Port Colborne and for people, but we need to make sure that they know all the ins and outs of it so that they can access it.
Correct. I mean, Councillor, we're taking a transit system that deals with a small area of our urban community and making it 100% accessible to 100% of our population. So you're right. It's there's going to be some growing pains. We all know that, but on the whole, you can go anywhere in Port Colborne and beyond within the region on this. So, and as again on the weekend, I ran into somebody at the grocery store, and unfortunately, there's some information being put out there that's I called it the propaganda that is quite wrong. But, we are continuing our Welland and St. Catharines regional bus that takes people into Welland for school or on to Brock University and to connect with those bus lines in those communities. So that's run through the region now. That's going to continue. But with 100% of our community being able to take the new system, it's just better for everybody, especially for youth that need to get to a job and their parents may not be able to take them, or somebody that, quite frankly, can't take the bus that we have now further than just the downtown core or a bit in the urban areas. So you're right, Barb. It's going to be good when it happens. Anything further, Councillor Bruno?
No, just to keep an eye on that fact that, we may have to, a building like that may need a poster in it. Barb's right, it already is Niagara Regional Housing, but certainly to date, there was some confusion there. And I suspect without something in paper, poster, something on their bulletin board, a Q&A, a piece that's a mail drop, I'm not sure what the solution is, but I think this is one of those ones where maybe the region would partner with this, but I think it needs to get in every household.
Okay, so between Councillor Butters, myself, Mr. Bowles, our communications, we will make sure that once all the information is put together properly on the best avenue to move forward. And again, with Barb and I being at the region, specifically Barb on the committee that runs public housing, she can take that to those people and but we'll work with our staff and their staff to get the message out, which needs to be done and properly.
And an advisory committee for the Niagara Regional Housing as well. So these kinds of things are absolutely critical to make sure residents are taken care of. I agree with you, Councillor Bruno. It'll probably have to be kind of a door-to-door leaflet, in their hands kind of thing. And I don't see that as a big problem.
No.
I see that as very doable.
Great,
Yeah.
thanks to both of you. I
100%.
think that's marvelous. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Bruno. Further questions to the regional councillor? Barb, the only thing tomorrow is our Public Works meeting, committee meeting, which you're not on.
Right.
I will be bringing up a notice of motion with regards to the issue of water and sewer that Mayor Redekop and I discussed at last week's budget meeting, and moving the region forward into looking at their infrastructure within our municipalities. I'll put my mayor's hat on right now.
Yep.
So for a program across Niagara, with the majority of municipalities, obviously Wainfleet being an exception, who doesn't have any water and sewer lines in their municipality, but on the inspection side of things. So I'll be working with our staff, Barb, with that. And Wayne, or Mayor Redekop, and I had a great conversation today. So he and I are going to move forward and bringing that to Public Works so that it can come out through our next regional council meeting. So keep an eye out for that.
I think that's excellent. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, again, Barb, always a pleasure. We'll see you at the region.
Yes, sir.
So this time we have staff remarks. Any staff member have anything? Mr. Bowles.
Thank you, Mayor. Through yourself to council, just a reminder, and I think council might have seen this, but for the community to also see it, we are moving the water wastewater budget a couple days to December 6th to accommodate just some scheduling. So I look forward to talking to everybody about our water wastewater on December 6th.
Good, thank you. Any other staff? Staff inside the chamber, Mr. Louis or our clerk, Amber? Do either of you have anything?
No, sir, nothing in the chambers.
Good, thank you. Okay, seeing nothing else from staff, I'm going to go on to councillors' remarks. I'll start off with Councillor Bruno since I can't see his hand up most of the time. So I'll start off with Councillor Bruno. Questions to staff?
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bagu?
I'm good tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells?
Nothing for me tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Bodner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, couldn't get the mute off. Yes, I do. I have a few. So I'll get everybody else's time, I guess. That
Yes.
didn't want anything. So, Mr. Mayor, through you to either the clerk or the CAO, wondering where we're at with our short-term rental bylaw, whatever we're going to call it. People that are affected by these are sitting there watching municipality after municipality in the region put something together. And so far, we're silent on it for the most part. So I wonder if we can get an update from someone that can tell us, either the CAO or the clerk.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, staff committed to, we put this on hold for the summer, but we were committed to kind of watching and seeing what happened and trying to deal with the issues as they arose. And a staff report will be coming forward with recommendations. I believe it will be coming in January.
Counselor?
Thank you. Is there anything in place at this time that we put in place to deter bad behavior?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, I will have to defer to Scott Lawson for that because that would be a bylaw question.
Chief Lawson?
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. With the AMPS program, we can actually start ticketing, and it's as easy as mailing that ticket to the owner at that time. We still recommend, if you're having noise problems after hours, to give Niagara Regional Police a call, and they can deal with it at that time, but then we can ticket them afterwards.
Councillor Bodner?
That's great on that one. One more, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Okay. So how many people know we have a polo club in the Niagara region?
I do.
All right, great. Well, in my role as in the tourism business, I'm just going to give a shout out to the Plain Bay Polo Center and the Greater Niagara Polo Club. They're trying to get the word out, and I'm going to do a little more investigation on this, and I'll report further on it. But just thought I'd get the word out.
Yep.
And one more,
Yeah, they're located on Regional Road 24, just north of Chambers Corners in the Municipality of Wainfleet. Beautiful facility. My son and I pulled in. We didn't get right in, but they were just starting to practice. One day we were coming back from a meeting in Smithville, and we sat there and watched them for a minute. But it's a beautiful facility. It's a horse training center, and they've put up that, I think within the last year or two, they've put that up. So I'd love to go see a game. I other than seeing it on TV in a few movies, I've never watched polo live. So
yeah, it sounds like a great thing. One more, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Remembrance Day. Harry and I will be attending at Centennial Park. It'll be a scaled back, still COVID affected affair, but Harry and I will be there, and I would expect our usual crowd will show up, and just to let you know, it's still happening. And that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I do thank you and Councillor Wells for attending that. You've done it for a number of years, but it is always has a good turnout of our Ward 4 residents for the old Humberston Township. So that's good that you guys are doing that. Councillor Danch.
Thank you so much. Just one concern. I sent a couple notes off there. A few residents around Hillcrest concerns with the cars parking on the road, restricting visibility with the area, the kids in the buses in the morning and stuff like that. One of the thoughts was maybe telling people not, park their cars in their driveway, but far be it from that, maybe a possible letter to the area residents there about where they're parking, and maybe looking into, when I was a kid in Brantford, my grandparents, one side of the street, 1st to the 15th, you parked on that side. second half of the month you parked on the opposite side, just to give people a break with all the extra cars and stuff like that. So I don't know if Scott can look into that for us, or Chris, or whatever, but I would appreciate something done there if we could.
Chief Lawson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch. If it's all right with you, why don't we start with making sure people are actually following the no parking areas first, and we can maybe make a strategy after we make sure people are following the rules that are in place. That might just fix the issue.
Councillor Danch?
You know, and if you can do something like that, Chief Lawson, that'd be wonderful. Just passing on off the concerns of some of the local residents. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So nothing further from council. We'll move on to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. And council, as I said earlier, 8.1 wasn't pulled by any of the councilors, but staff do have an amendment. So I'll read that. So I'm going to have councilors Bruno and Bodner move the 2022 levy budget report 2021-275, that the Corporate Services Department Financial Services Division report 2021-275 subject 2022 levy budget be received, and that the 2022 levy budget as outlined in report 2021-275 be approved as amended, with a memorandum from Amber Lapointe, Acting Director of Planning and Development Clerk, Development Charges Process. Does anybody have any questions? As I said, this wasn't pulled, but they did have an amendment from what was originally posted. Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Thank you, council. Next is item 8.2. I'll have councilors Wells and Bagu move that the Corporate Services Department report 2021-277 be received, that the 2022 proposed user fees and charges schedule attached as appendices A to U of Corporate Services Report 2021-277 be approved, and that the draft bylaw attached as Appendix 5 of the Corporate Services Report 2021-277 be brought forward to council for consideration. I have the following councilors' questions. Councilor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Not so much a question, but maybe more of clarification, just so that the public can understand that the fees that we see in the report tonight are not all the fees that we have in Port Colborne, but they're only a part of that. And I believe it's important for everybody to understand that this is to adjust the fees is not something that can be done overnight. And maybe Director Bowles can elaborate a little bit more in regards to his plan on how we're going to proceed to review all the fees to see what we can do to get them more current and more covering the costs that are incurred. So if Mr. Bowles could just give us his plan on that.
Great, thank you, Councilor. Director Bowles.
Yeah, through the mayor to council, I appreciate the question. So when we started the user fee process, we as staff and we tried to identify it as people have asked the question, tackled some of the larger fees that we had. So we went and we took a look at the Public Works Department. We took a look at the self-sustaining entities that the city has, and we put forward the fees with those updates. In the February-March period, we anticipate to be back in front of council looking at fees related to the cemetery, building fees, and I've confirmed with the clerk, we'll be looking at the planning fees as well at that point in time. And once we've done that, we'll then roll over later in the summer, going into the fall, the rest of the fees. So that way we've had the time and given council the time to look at each section of fees as we've gone through the whole process. So leading into the 2023 budget process, we'll have brought all the fees up and done a full review of all the fees.
Thank you, Director Bowles. Councilor Wells.
Thanks, Director Bowles. I wish you luck on getting through all that in that time frame. Well, you've set the expectation, so now we'll have to hold you to it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next, I have Councilors Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I had the same question as Councilor Wells, but he could comment more eloquently than myself. So thank you very much, Councilor Wells, for my question, and Director Bowles for the answer.
Thank you, Counselor. Next on 8.2 is Counselor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I had the same question as Councilor Wells as well. I did actually send in today. I didn't realize you were speaking to 8.1. I had sent that into the clerk, but had not pulled or reneged on pulling 8.1A, the memorandum. So I don't know if I know we voted on it. It was more of a statement and a question, not an amendment or to change the vote. I'm just wondering if I could speak.
Yeah, let's get the vote on this, and then
Sure.
We'll go back to that, Counselor.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. Again, your hand does come up every once in a while, but then it disappears. So I don't know if you want to ask or not, but maybe just throw your mic on between when I speak or another counselor speaks, just to make sure we see your hand up. Director Bowles, did you have another comment to make?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out with respect to this report, and I appreciate Councillor Wells' review. He did find that one of the fees on Appendix J, the daily pass for the boat ramp, was actually out in the rounding a penny. And we'll fix it at the administrative side, but I do want to point out to anybody that may be watching that on an administrative basis, when we finalize the bylaw, the clerk has identified that she'll adjust that fee by that. Thank you.
Good. Any further questions? Okay, so we have that moved by Councilors Wells and Bagu. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. So back to Councilor Bruno on a comment with regards to 8.1. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. We're trying to fix that hand issue here, but I think we've got it solved now. I just wanted to thank Mr. Bowles and his team, along with staff and council, who a few of us have been around here for a while, and I thought it was one of the best budget processes ever. But I think what made it great is these trimester reports along the way, that we're becoming more familiar with the direction finance is taking and where we're headed. So I found it both one of the best processes over the years, and certainly the explanations led to a rather shortened Q&A at the council meeting. So thank you to that. I did want to just ask Mr. Bowles, through you, given the 2.8 blended increase, I wanted maybe Mr. Bowles to comment on, certainly we all heard it in budget deliberations, that we could have even been lower than 2.8, and we did have a drop in funding from the province, and we did have a regulation that came in with respect to our insurance. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Bowles, if you would have the figure of what was mandated in that 2.8 that we really had no control over, and what that would have done to the rate.
Director Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor to the councilor and council, we did have the provincial reduction, and then we had the incident or the situation where we no longer can obtain insurance for the resumptive cancer claims within our fire department. And the cumulative cost of those two is about 1%. So the budget that's been passed is for 2.8. Without those two requirements, we actually would have been at about 1.8% without the, I guess, mandated costs, as the councillor put it.
Great. Thank you, Director Bowles. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you, Brian. That's all I had. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. So on to item 9.1, the recommendations that Public Works Service Department to report 2021-291 be received, that Sierra Planning and Management be directed to conduct a public open house meeting by mid-December to solicit public feedback on the draft road end study report, and that Sierra Planning and Management be directed to report back to council in the first half of Q1 2022 with relevant comments incorporated into the draft road ends report for council's consideration. I'm going to have councilors Wells and Bodner move that. Also this evening, council, we have John Hack from Sierra Planning and Management, and he will be providing us with a presentation. Mr. Hack, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm very happy to be here to give you a presentation. It's fairly long, and I know that it was provided as a package, so I will try and focus on the elements that are most relevant for this evening. But part of the purpose here is to come back to you with a statement of where the work is at, and I think to give council some assurance that some of the recent discussions that you've had with staff as it relates to the issue of gate access and the correct approach, just to assure you that there is alignment between that and what we're doing as well. I believe the Amber is going to assist with just turning the slides. So if you could just do that, thank you. So just to remind everyone, just as a recap, certainly for members of the public that might be watching as well, there are a number of road allowances that end at the shore of Lake Erie. And from west to east, this goes from Lorain Road, Weaver, Pinecrest, Cedar Bay, Silver Bay, Wildwood, Pleasant Beach Road, and then finally at the eastern fringe, Holloway Bay Road as well. So that was the subject that we were looking at, the road allowances that terminate with the sand at the shoreline. Next slide, please. Members of council will recall that at this time last year, or a little bit later last year and into the new year, we conducted a survey with all of the complications that COVID presented to us in terms of getting information out to cottage owners that live across the border, international border. I think, and then there was some consideration that people wanted to be able to fill the survey out when they were outside of this zone. And we had created this zone in good faith, as you recall, to try and create a very large area where our focus was on finding out how residents and businesses that own properties in this area, what their experience has been of people coming down and using the road ends essentially for recreation purposes, and recognizing that these are not public parks, they're not beaches as such, and they're not operated as such. I think the survey was quite successful, and I'm going to give you a recap on that. But that slide in front there is just to give you a sense of how many properties were targeted in the work that we're doing. It's a lot of individual addresses there. Next slide. Again, just a process reminder that the consultation program was very quite robust, and we've gradually worked through this. A little bit of a hiatus over the summer, but in terms of who we spoke to, obviously there was a survey of property owners. There was some concern on the part of the public, meaning those outside of the that might reside outside of the zone, or may even not even reside at all in Port Colborne, but wish to participate. We allowed those people to obviously channel their energies and fill out the survey. So we've collected all of that information should we ever need it going forward. We spoke to adjacent property owners, certainly the commercial ones, I should say. And we've sought the opinion of council and certain managers of the city over the course of this work as well. So a fairly in-depth exercise to date. And I think it bodes well for some of the outcomes. Next slide. I'm not going to go through this, but one of the things that has happened in recent date, is that the whole matter of parking prohibitions or management of parking along the north-south axes of these road allowances has been subject to essentially consolidation and fresh thinking by the by the city staff. And so what's being shown here, and there's a very good graphic that council may have seen at another time, and certainly members of the public should see it when we go back to the public at a public meeting later this year. It's a very helpful graphic to show how parking is being managed to reflect that there is a demand for parking close to these, and we'll call them informal beaches, and yet because they are not operated as such, there needs to be a fairly clear picture of parking enforcement. And so certainly I thought it was very useful that the city had done that. And a lot of what we are indicating in terms of possible solutions actually leverages off this consolidation. Hitherto, before we had this, there was quite a stock of bylaws that have been written over time related to individual road allowances. So this, although I'm not going to go through the detail, these parking prohibitions and therefore parking allowances, to just use the other side of the coin, isn't it in certain parts of the road allowance and at certain times is I think an important part of the management. Next slide. So I just wanted to draw upon the gate access matters because we have been working with senior management at the city to follow the process of staff reporting on effective management of the gates and the implications of that. So just to remind everyone, and perhaps to tell you that we understand the issues. There are 7 open unimproved road allowances that we've talked about. 3 are open and barrier free, as you listed there. And a number of them have locked gates. So Lorraine, Silver Bay, Wildwood, and Pleasant Beach Road. The current proposition is that the city limit vehicular access in alignments to allow sort of municipal regulatory access, but also as a matter of requirement for those people that have accessibility challenges, that they also are provided with the opportunity to gain access through those gates. There's nothing, and there's a process to follow that that's been suggested in staff reports. There's nothing in that would fall outside of the alignment with what we would suggest in terms of management of these areas. There is, however, some things that and this should be a discussion point, certainly at the public level as well, whether or not we want to leverage off of these provisions to ensure that there are sufficient accessibility measures in place at the road ends. And I'm talking about things such as accessible parking spaces, for example. But we'll get to that when we go through the recommendations. Next slide, thanks. This is really just to summarize very broadly, in terms of providing accessibility measures, it really is a case of focusing on Pleasant Beach and Wildwood primarily. And I say that because, and you'll see this in the recommendations, the proposition here, unless directed otherwise, is that none of these road allowances are operated as beaches. They're not beaches, they are road ends, and people have the right to access those road ends. But because they're not operated as beaches, there does not need to necessarily be the same approach for every single of these road allowances. And so I think it's a matter for some discussion, and that is the purpose perhaps of this update, and certainly the purpose of public discussion, is to ask what level of amenity, broadly speaking, should be provided at certain of these. So we're really talking about Pleasant Beach and Wildwood, further back up the road allowance from where the sand starts, so back into the road proper, as I can call it. And so that's the sort of thing that we need to look at. Next slide. Yeah, here's another one as well. In looking at best practices. And again, here the issue is whether or not it operates, whether it looks and feels like a beach, whether it should operate like a beach. But the provision of accessibility onto some of the road ends is a feature that you see and you see the picture there, which is from another part of the world, but it's the same idea, is that at the correct season, you can provide accessibility, which actually extends, beyond just accessing the gate, and actually is a statement to that effect. The question is whether you feel you need to do it in multiple locations or whether it should be done at all, and that can be discussed. Next slide. So just going through, I want to give you an update. Next slide, please, Madam Clerk. I want to give you a quick update. We sort of gave Council a very detailed overview of all of the survey results back in April. We've simplified things quite a bit and focused only on the results that we had from people that live within the zone. So just very quickly, I want to sort of itemize who is responding here, because what we're seeing in these survey results directly relates to how we should manage some of the road ends. So it's an important connection. So almost half of all respondents said that their properties front directly onto the road allowances. So they have, in my view, a prima facie right to be heard in terms of what happens on those roadways in terms of managing visitor traffic, as well as their own enjoyment of the beach area. 24% within the main survey zone, 83% within a kilometer, 57% are long-term owners, and I say that as meaning 10 years plus. About 40 of them seasonal residents, and about a third, almost a third, believe they have deeded access to the shoreline. The question was not prove to us you have deeded access. It was do you recall, do you believe you have deeded access to the shoreline? Next slide. So we've simplified this in terms of a few items, where are the problems and where there are no problems. So in terms of the responses, you can see there that where there are very few problems, relatively speaking, you don't get a lot of commentary. Where there was considerable issue, such as at Pleasant Beach Road, you can see they account for a considerable amount of the responses. Next slide, please. So why do you access the beach? This one is important, and there you can see quite clearly either walking to and from, enjoyment of the public land, of the road end itself, something a little bit more specific, such as getting trailer access to the water, which would be via one of those gates in those locations that have gates along them, or to access the property from the beach, and so on. And then, do you require ongoing access? So this one, I think, is one of the more important ones. And I'm encouraged that about 50% roughly that are in zone, and then we had those which are out of zone as well, are recognizing that they'll need to have pedestrian access to those road ends. And just to remind everyone, whether or not people then wander across other people's properties, that of course is a matter of private trespass. This is not something that necessarily this study needs to address itself. Obviously, we don't want to promote activities that would give rise to those kinds of conflicts. But here you see it. Pedestrian access is viewed as important by people that live throughout that zone. Similarly, some people, about a quarter, let's say, want to have access by both vehicle and on foot. So that's half of the number that wish to get there by foot as well. So from my read of this is that what we need to protect most importantly is pedestrian access to the beach. Next slide. So this is the issues. Were they or were they not a problem? So we've simplified it. Either it was a problem, so one end of the bookend, one bookend is there's no problem, and that's in sort of orange, and then the gray is, was there a significant problem? And there were ranges in between, but just to focus on it, you can see that parking in front of the driveways, generally it's not a problem for anyone. So that seems to be well managed. Where there is an uptick, a slight impulse towards that issue, it's at Wildwood and Pleasant Grove. And similarly, parking on the shoulder of the road, so just generally parking where parking is not necessarily permitted. Again, the problem is at the eastern end, Wildwood and Pleasant Breach. Very little problem in other locations. Next slide, please, Madam Clerk. Littering as well. You can see generally, again, it's the same locations that have the bigger issue, although there is some concern at almost all of these, with the exception of Pinecrest, and I'm not sure why that was not a problem at all. Sorry, why that was listed as really, not being a significant problem. Everywhere seems to have some degree of perceived problems. So right there, in terms of recognizing that these beach ends are a destination, might lend themselves to some level of municipal service provision in the form of waste collection, for example, public littering stations, things of that nature. And they can be designed so that it is not necessarily a concern to local residents. Perceived trespass, the numbers are self-explanatory. I think a fair degree of trespass is perceived, whether it's actual or not. That's a case-by-case matter. But as you can see there, that's a feature of the land ownership that exists there, with the exception of Cedar Bay, and that's an interesting one. But Cedar Bay generally perceived to be public ownership, although it's not. Either side of Cedar Bay, the lateral land ownership that extends across the beach obviously gives some indication that it's viewed as public. So that's an important recognition as well. Next slide. And then just finally, firstly, apologies for the misspelling of Wildwood. If anyone is looking there, it's a collector's piece. It won't be misspelled like this again. You can see in terms of illegal dumping, again, when you get a numbers above 20%, it's obviously a concern on the part of these residents. As it relates to noise disturbance, again, a quarter of residents citing it as a significant problem. And then washroom access, again, a quarter to a third in those two road ends, citing the need for an improvement to the amenity there, so they don't have to. So there is not a possible impact on their enjoyment of private property or the beach itself. Next slide. And lastly, just very quickly, this is important, the willingness to consider various measures. So fencing sufficient to prevent, so we outlined in the survey various ways, from the good to the quite draconian, one of which might be completely fence off from preventing any public access, leaving aside whether or not that's actually legal or not. Just the idea that you essentially limit the rights of access onto that beach for particular reasons, whether it be safety or anything else. Generally people are not supportive of that, with the exception of people that are perhaps frustrated at the area where there's most activity, such as Pleasant Beach Road. Those that are, the other option we gave them was maintaining current policy of vehicular gates. So those areas that have vehicular gates, was there support for it? And you can see there's a lot of support. Pleasant Beach, Wildwood, Silver Bay, that have these gates, very strong support. So in terms of their functioning, it's something that is supported and should be maintained. Next one. Add more legal parking further away from the beach, or on and off streets, so away from those areas closest. And again, of note there would be places such as Cedar Bay, which are heavily utilized, Wildwood, and Pleasant Beach as well. And then this is perhaps the most salient. A lot of people were concerned that we might be considering or recommending sale of the road allowance lands at the shoreline to private ownership. So we asked the question, not because we had it in mind, but because we have to ask the spread of possibilities. And you can see with the exception of Holloway Bay Road there, and the few people that responded, the majority of people there just do not consider that to be a viable option. So it is not supported by owners. Next slide, please. Sorry for the length of this. So we're almost through this part of it. Partial sale of the road allowance. So in other words, you'd sell a little bit of it to one side or the other, and maintain an access through to the beach. That wasn't generally supported from in a couple of locations, but generally it's not a strong option. Now, the issue of creating public parks, I mentioned at the outset, everything we've done here and everything we're showing you this evening reflects the fact that we're not putting forward any of these places as operational public parks. And so it is about management of the road ends and the roads leading to them. But you can see here that where there are some perceived issues, such as at Pleasant Beach, almost a quarter recognize that there may be some value in creating, formalizing the amenities and the operations there, so it looks and feels and operates with some level of parkland type status. And then again, you can see that at Cedar Bay. As to why Lorain Road had that opinion, I know this is the nature of surveys, but it is a statement for some people, and that again is a sort of a primary discussion point that needs to be addressed going forward. But as I said, at the moment, there's nothing that we're recommending here that you'll see that is about formal creation of municipal parks. Next slide. So next slide, please, Amber. So I'm just going to go through really quickly to finish off the discussion. I appreciate everyone's patience, but Lorain Road really isn't much to do here other than support the parking bylaw that does have prohibitions right down by the gate, by perhaps improved landscaping in the right of way. It's too easy to park down there, and you can see that if you scroll in or have a chance to. You see the grass has been removed there, and so there are ways to sort of manage the ability to be able to park on the shoulder of the roads. Next one. So on Weaver, now this one needs some consideration. I think we want to put this back to staff for consideration, either to cure us of our ignorance or to confirm that there may be something that we need to do. So obviously this is where there's an outflow into the lake. There are some steep sides. There's water on one side. There's no fencing. It's not a beach in anybody's lexicon. It is very much a working road end in that sense. We do think there needs to be some consideration of measures, whether it be signage or something else, that should be put in place to perhaps manage the possibility of safety issues there as well. But I think we have not spoken to members of Public Works about this, so we may be speaking from a position of a little bit of ignorance, but we're just looking at some of the photographs that we took. You can see there, for example, on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's an Armco barrier. There's a guardrail all the way back up, but at this area close to the sluice gates, there is no such barrier. So I think there's some conversation that we need to have, and we'll come back to council with a sort of a collective opinion on that. Next one, please. Yeah, so that's really what I've just discussed. So next slide, please. So Pinecrest, this for me is the one that has the greatest potential to make a really good, positive story out of the road and allowances. If you travel down this, it's very residential, and you get to the end of it, and there is a view that you can take if you were to look essentially to the south east. You can see a bit of a peninsula. That's a nice view. You can essentially see it from that top picture there with the tree. The way that road end is configured, all within the public ownership right away. There's some raised land, there's some scrub. It's not a beach. No one's going down there to spend a full day there. It's a great opportunity for putting in, and if you go to the next slide, there are some examples. A great opportunity, in my opinion, to actually create a bit of a destination hub there. Not for vehicles necessarily, but it's the kind of thing where if you have an active transportation approach, so people are on their bicycles, and they're doing it in other municipalities that border onto the lakes, you can create a viewing platform that works very well with the surrounding neighborhoods, and in fact would reinforce their ownership boundaries, if anything. And would still maintain emergency vehicle access, but allows for seating, for viewing, and would be as possible for an interpretive signage of some kind. It could be very much a tourist-oriented development that is low impact and works well with giving a real purpose to some of these road ends. So whereas you had Weaver there, where you don't have that opportunity, Pinecrest you do, and I think it needs to be grasped as an opportunity. Next one. So Cedar Bay, this one is interesting. You saw the results of the survey. People see this as one where you might put a public park in. Of course, you have a public park, and you can see the land ownerships there faintly along the beach. It's not, the individual properties don't go north-south into the beach area and into the water. So the ownership of strips is lateral. I know that council has taken some legal advice on who these owners are and whether or not it is a public beach. If you go to the next slide. We did some work as well, and so you can see these are the ownership. So if we go straight to the, should be swapped around here, I apologize. The Cedar Bay one on the right-hand side, you have two parcels left and right, and essentially they are not in city ownership, not from what we can tell, but the nature of their use and the length that they've been used does suggest that they have sort of public status. And you see that in the survey results. The question will be, is this a place for a formalized beach access? And as the public wants, well, we'll hear what the public say, but council did the right thing through staff to get some legal opinion on what the limits and liabilities are of accessing those areas. I don't need to go into the details right now, but it's an area where we need to be very careful about what activities are being promoted there, but people clearly use it. And on the left-hand side, and I apologize, it should be on the right-hand side, that's the continuation of that strip all the way up to Silver Bay. So it works as informal access, let's say. Next one. Silver Bay there, I've really addressed that in the preceding slides. Nothing particular that needs to be done. There is a gate there, and it works. Next one. Again, a number of these, and this is one where an active transportation approach, in other words, promoting the use of these road ends for tourism in terms of allowing people to come in as visitors to cycle. They can link up with the multi-use trail that bifurcates this area going up to Highway 3. These are all opportunities. And even in this location, there's an opportunity for things like litter control, better than you see in the picture there, some interpretation, and possibly even some bench seating as well. So if council has a mind, there's some things that can be done. You have to work with the property owners. But these lands, I'll remind everyone, are in public ownership, and you do have the ability to develop them, not to bring more people down, but to create the opportunity for passive enjoyment, which I think is what we're talking about here. Next one, please. Wildwood. So there are just some of the mechanics. You can see a fairly wide gate, a wide road access, even though it's 66 feet. There isn't anything other than the dunes really getting in the way there in terms of walking down through there. Obviously, Shirkston on the eastern side has some fencing that they put up or some barriers, and they need to maintain that. And obviously on the western side, some of these very pleasant, very good housing investments obviously need to protect their interests as well. So it's a tricky one here in that what can you do? You can't promote it as a beach. This is not one where you would create a public beach. This for me is about amenities being managed further back up the roadway, and the parking prohibitions and the provision of accessible parking that is being provided under bylaw is certainly one way to do that as well. Next slide. So again, without getting into too much detail here, I think the solutions here, besides access to the beach for all pedestrians and those with accessibility challenges, would be that you should maintain municipal ownership, work with the partners, either side respecting the property boundaries, but it is also their duty to do so as well. Provide amenities further back up. As you can see there are opportunities just in that view that you see there to improve the organization of that space so that there's clarity. One of the things as a visitor you find is if there is development, there are lines, there's clarity as to signage, what you can, what you can't do. People generally will respect that. And where there is not, where there is a dead end, where there is any kind of uncertainty, that's where you run into problems. Next slide. And Pleasant Beach Road, and you can see a couple of pictures there we took back in September of 2020, and it looks like any beach anywhere. A lot of people on the beaches, whether they're Shirkston residents or others, we don't know. But it is Shirkston property there on the west. We did speak with Shirkston. They do want to be a partner, and in the report that we produce for you, we will go into a little bit more detail about what some of those possibilities are and what the pluses and minuses are of those particular options. But essentially, if you go to the next slide, what are the options there? Well, I think it starts with recognizing the demand. So you have to do something. It's more than just parking enforcement. And a couple of things that we've noticed, accessible parking. Again, if you want this to be a solution, then perhaps this needs to be closer to the barriers as opposed to further away. And again, I'm not going to get into it this evening, but the idea, there are partnership solutions that can be something that we want to be able to write up and provide council with in terms of provision of some of these amenities and services. It is about traffic management, and there may even be some opportunity for possibly acquisition so that things could be better managed off the roadway itself. So those are the things that we're looking at. But bottom line, Pleasant Beach Road needs to be addressed kind of full on, as opposed to just dealing it only in terms of parking control. Next slide. Holloway Bay, nothing really much to say other than an overdue conversation on our end, and we will rectify that, is with the town of Fort Erie, just to discuss some of the issues as it relates to that. There is no vehicular access through the dunes at this point, and the question would be whether or not there is some trail opportunities or anything that could be done again to promote a bit of an interesting lookout onto the water. Next slide. And that is the end of the presentation. So, Mr. Mayor, if I can return it to you, and I apologize to council for the length of the presentation, but it's fairly detailed stuff.
Great, John. Appreciate your presentation this evening. And I'm going to go to questions. If I could have Councillor Wells go first.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the refresher on that, John. It's good to see that. One of the issues that has been raised was the time frame given for public involvement. With the middle of December, not much more than a month away, the sooner we can land on a date that we can publicize and get out to the public, the better off we would be to get good quality input on it and attendance at the public meeting. So I encourage you to set a date as soon as you can on that. That was my one comment. I have a question though. We do have road ends on the west side of the canal. And I'm just wondering if those were ever brought up or mentioned in regards to being part and parcel of the survey.
John?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, our commission was pretty specific to these 7. So I didn't venture west in terms of looking into some of the specifics. So we did not create the survey to address any of those road ends as well. So it's just east of the canal.
Councilor?
Okay. Thank you. And I look forward to the open house public meeting mid-December. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just kind of a statement. People have contacted me wanting to know should they be sending their concerns to council and councilors. And I think at any time you can send your concern to any one of us, but I would suggest that you make sure you get it into the public meeting record. Don't rely on individual councilors to carry your message forward. So in that vein, is it very clear to people how to, now there's the people that have already did it once, I think they got that, but there may be new people now that are interested after they've actually seen this. So is it very clear? Would they go to our website to find out where to send their concerns to John and company? Or how best would they do that? And it may be through John that can enlighten us on that.
I'll through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start the question then. If members of staff want to join in, I suspect that there is not a good mechanism at this time, and we would need to, as Councillor Wells said, get a date set and get some advertising and some content on the website so that it's clear to people that they have the opportunity to send in any and all concerns. And we can do it positively. It doesn't have to be send complaints. It's send concerns or questions, and we can build, and that will help us build an effective response at the public meeting as well. And this presentation, as an example, should be up as part of that as well. So yeah, I think we need to start to re-engage in terms of getting people's attention on this in order for them to be effective in getting their questions to staff and then to us.
Thanks, John. Mr. Kawamoto, anything to add?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council. For that, as soon as the date is selected, and as the report notes, it is by mid-December. So we're hopefully to have that early, but I will work with Mr. Hack on that. and also work with our communications division to ensure that it is up on the website and people are communicated to once that date is set. And we'll also put some contact information and any other relevant information up on our website.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Bodnar.
Good.
Good. Thank you. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, John, for the excellent presentation. And I echo some of the thoughts that bringing this back and putting it in front of us now, when we've had some debate about locking gates and that has really spurred a lot of interest by people that are local residents. And I want to come back to that at the end. But one of the things that has struck me about this entire debate and the survey is really when I look at tonight's agenda and see the item road ends. And I find that somewhat misleading and really, I think, can muddy the waters to this. The title of your presentation, the first two words are road allowances. And I believe that the road allowances, the beach, the water, access, in a chicken and an egg cause and effect scenario, is about the road allowance and the water. And it's not by accident that the road allowance being spoken about this evening, the 7, the 4, and the 3, are all about the beach. We're here tonight not generally talking about road ends. We're talking about road allowances and what effect they have on the road ends. And I'm very concerned that one of the, this has gotten lots of debate in years past in the town of Fort Erie and a whole bunch of things about how to manage road allowances. I just think if it quacks like a duck and it swims like a duck, it's a duck. And this is a road allowance, and the road allowances to the water. And that's the driver of everything. And I really think that if road allowances and access to the beach were mentioned, you're going to start getting a whole bunch of a different audience that's talking about, I want to enter at a road allowance, to an audience that's beyond maybe the most people that are caught up in this survey. I.e., I have a neighbor who heard about this in a roundabout way when it came to the gate issue and locking it. It came up to me and said, well, I use the boat ramp for a small craft. Can I get a key? And I'm a senior, and it'd be a lot easier for me if I went down to one of these road allowances and was able to get in to launch my boat. And besides, the ramp is a charge fee and it's chaotic down there. I think the other thing about some of the things you talked about, not managing these as a park, but yet there's talks of a washroom at this beach or buy some land for an expanded parking. That issue in itself may have unintended consequences. A lot of what's happened 2 years ago and a result of the parking, and I think the parking has been handled really well through a lot of hard work by a lot of people. But, I'm concerned about careful what you wish for. This end of Niagara region has been discovered during the pandemic, and a lot of our problems up to date has been about both resident and non-resident or expanded use of the road allowances. And that's put more pressure on what is a finite resource. It's 66 feet wide. We don't talk much about capacity like we would in a bar or in a restaurant or anything else, but we can make it more accessible down there. We can buy property, we could add a washroom, but I would argue that that's just going to put more pressure and invite more people to what a capacity that hasn't changed. It's still the 66 feet and as long as it was. You can do all kinds of things, but the one thing you can't do is create more road allowance width unless you're willing to buy property on either side. And I'm just concerned that the discussion hasn't centered around capacity of these problems and the current use of them. And part of the reason why we're here tonight and this report was issued. And if I could just say one more thing. The other part of the title of your presentation is informal access. But the recommendations and the things we're doing in gates, locked, unlocked, key access, whatever, is all about formalized access. Informalized access is what's happening now. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, not a lot of tight rules. But, you know, I think that we can't look, we need to look at formalizing these access, and you've done some recommendations on this. I know I'm hopping between two subjects, but I think we may be taking, there's a couple other balls in the air that you're not addressing. And John, I don't know if you could speak to that.
John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yeah, well, listen, thank you very much for the commentary. I think you've sort of nailed the reality that we have to take a sort of command position here as to which way do you want this to go. You're right. If we are providing amenities, then what are we actually saying? If we're not operating it as a municipal park, but we're keeping it as a road end, but we're recognizing there's a problem in some of these road allowances, by providing some amenities, responding to the demand that exists, are we doing everything but? And I think that is a, you know, I don't come from the lens of trying to sort of just say, well, it's a road end. We shouldn't be enabling this demand. Therefore, you know, the problems just roll on. I think you have to do something. I do agree with you. If buying property and sort of investing in the areas around appears to be going too far, then I think that's a council decision. And maybe that can be further researched and we can look at that. But in terms of management of that roadway, and I agree with you, the way the parking prohibitions have been handled, I think is really quite good. We start with that. And then it's a question of really formalizing some of these areas. And I just sort of say again, when you get to an area where there's not a lot of formalization to the end of the road, it gives people a sense that, you know, they've arrived here, they kind of can do what they like to do, and they can sort of wander onto the beach and off we go. I've done it myself in other places, and I haven't done it because I'm you know, scofflaw. You know, there wasn't that control. So I think there does need to be some investment at the end of these roads. That's my gut, but people will tell us what level is appropriate. And as for, you know, the reality is there is informal beach access, and I do think, yeah, we ultimately will be changing this titling to a series of measures that we think need to be put in place.
Councillor?
John, I very much appreciate it. I couldn't agree with you more on every item you raised and how we might be handling it. Should we be better off coming to you? Well, let me ask this question first. I think it's going to lead into the second. In your experience out there, I mean, we're blessed with the fact that we have a couple of good chunks of public property with beach access, so Cedar Bay and Nickel Beach. And I don't know, often the way to resolve issues is to say, we're going to be all about this here, and we're going to be all about this in this other location. And I don't know if you can speculate or from experience speak to, you know, should we, the tightening of the parking and the setting of our stall as this is what these road allowances are about. If you want, right, to, I don't know, you know, bring your, you know, blow up beach boat or that access, this is the place you could go. So not it's, you know, there's a sign, you know, capacity limited, don't park here, don't come here. But it's also on the positive, right? If you're looking for, right, more space, yada, 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 whatever, right? Please be directed to here and here. Have you come across a community that has sort of the alternative approach that we have, and yet they do have road allowances, and they've found a way to drive maybe more visitor access to the large beach, gated, ticketed washroom there, amenities, all of that to those, and use the road allowances more as a local resource.
John?
Thank you for the question through you, Your Worship. There are some experiences. I'm not sure how well they exact fit. The one that jumps to mind is the areas around Wasaga Beach, and you know, and the reality is that you have this enormous freshwater beach system that's just massive, and it's anchored by a provincial park. So all these different beach accesses are allowed. That's where people go. If you go north of Wasaga, even within the city limits or the town limits, and then go further up, there's a number of different accesses to the water that cut onto, and it's almost identical to this. People go onto the beaches and they can walk along the beaches. I don't know the road, the circumstances of the road, of the ownership of the individual lots, whether they go into the water. I suspect they don't. I think there's probably a shoreline road allowance that goes around. So I think and I think that's true in parts of Lake Ontario as well, around places like Presqu'île Park. If you go down there, you have a provincial park, then you have a series of cottage properties as well. I think your circumstance, I know it's not atypical. It's fairly common for Niagara region. You have a complicated ownership pattern. You know, we can look, councillor, and see if we can get some themes of that can be consistently applied. But I think you have to do sort of the most common sense approach here. And I do think that it means, out of all of these road allowances, recognizing that every solution is slightly different, and sometimes there's no solution at all. Like, we wouldn't suggest doing anything on Lorraine. Whether or not Weaver has to be addressed is really a matter of whether I've got it right or wrong in terms of observations about, managing things for safety. And then, Pleasant Beach is one way. We had those out of zone respondents to the survey were people that like to use that beach and a few others. And they lived outside of Port Colborne in many cases, and they want to maintain the access. So I think you're going to have to do something there, and I think there are, like, without getting drawn into lots of details, you can manage traffic flow. You can, as long as you have the residents on board to accept certain changes down there in terms of flow of traffic or landscaping into the roadways, so that you slow traffic down, you make it more quite obvious that it's not intended for vehicles, for example. You know, they do this in lots of cities around the world that have the challenges of either small roads or too much demand. And there are ways you can manage that stuff, and it's not cheap. And I'm not suggesting that we go off and create an unrealistic plan, but I don't think you can leave Pleasant Beach just to parking measures at this point and gate access measures. There needs to be something else there.
Okay, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John.
Great, thank you, Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thank you, John, for the presentation. You did mention about Shirks and Shores bringing in some comment. I'd be very, very interested to hear what they have to say, especially with the big expansions they're going through all the time. I've gone down, I've seen their beach from our road allowance, and their beach is packed solid. They built a lot more trailers in there, and basically I can see big problems coming within a few years regarding our road allowances, because if I'm going to pay $4,000 a week to sit on the Shirks and Shores, I want access to the beach. And because the neighbors have free access, the Sherkston shores, especially the beach, I think something's going to come to a head eventually, with the residents, nearby residents that, have passes, I guess you call them, and the actually people that rent the trailers. So I'd be very interested to hear what Sherkston Shore has to say. I know they won't share their business plan with us, but whatever they have, I appreciate. Thank you.
Great. John, any comment?
No, just to recognize the councillor's point. This is a big landowner. They do have plans. There are a lot of people using their beaches, and they do have some opinions as to how to manage these areas at Wildwood and Pleasant Beach. But I think you have to, we have to look at this from the perspective that you're not going to be selling any road allowances here at this point. And so, what can you do to maintain control and residential amenity in those areas? That's the key here.
Good, thanks, John. Yeah. Councilors, any further questions to the presenter? Seeing none, again, thank you, John, for this presentation this evening, and we look forward to moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions on the report? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Item 9.2. The Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-288 be received, that the request for proposal and draft guidelines for the sale and development of 235-241 Welland Street attached as Appendix A and B to Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-288 be approved, and that the Manager of Strategic Initiatives be directed to issue an RFP for the sale and development of 235-241 Welland Street. I have Councilors Bruno and Danch moving this. Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I know a lot of hard work has gone on and some expense to get this right, and I think we all had a look previous weeks on the results of the design study. My concern now is the last sort of 5%, and that is the messenger. So at the end of the day, I think we've got this as refined as could be, but I'm concerned that this has been such a good process with people on our staff knowing council's direction, how they feel about it, how we got from a sale to an RFP, and now they're conversant with all that. Now, I would just like to see that we ensure that the contact people between the development community and who are interested in this property be talking to the people that are the most informed. And so I'd like to, on process, I'd like to hear from Mr. Long or Mr. Cotton as to whether we will be the contact in that RFP, because in those discussions and negotiations, the best thing we could have is people who can speak to that is the direction council's going, and yes, that possible tweak could happen, and I will get back to you, and they're part of the city. So that's what I'm going to push for. Perhaps that's already the idea. If Mr. Long could comment, I see he's up there on the screen. Thank you.
Mr. Long?
Through you, your worship, to council. There's a lot of exciting projects in the city of Port Colborne, and this is one of them. And to answer the council's question, it's our intention to issue an RFP. As council is aware, in that RFP, I am listed as the point of contact for any questions regarding the RFP or design guidelines. I know my colleague and our economic development officer, Bram Cotton, who is also on the call tonight, will also be assisting me and our office with any other inquiries that come in from the development community, from investors who may be interested in submitting development proposals. So I think to the councilor's point, Typically, the city would use a real estate agent to sell properties owned by the city. For this particular project, we are bringing this in-house, and our division will field any inquiries that come in. We will receive the RFPs, and then we will arrange to bring the RFPs to council in closed session in the near future. So there will not be a real estate agent involved. Both myself and our EDO have had conversations with our real estate agent of record, and he is aware of this process.
Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Mr. Long. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's fine for now.
Okay, any further questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 9.3, that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-292 be received, and that a patio stall extension through to December 31st, 2021 be approved pending the comprehensive review and consultation of the city's encroachment policy. I have Councillors Wells and Bagu moving this. I'm going to go to Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to support the concerns and comments that were raised by the Public Works group. With regards to this, I believe that the intent of having a winter wonderland display is great. I think that would be nice to have in the city, even though it would be short-lived. But I think it would be nice, but I'm not sure that the location where we have this in the parking stalls would be ideal for it. It would have to go up, come down, potentials with weathers causing problems with it. So I like the idea of having a Winterland scenery display, but I have to stand and support the Public Works concerns with regards to safety and snow removal.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor Wells. I love Winter Wonderland scenes. Allison's puts a great one on King George Park across from the Legion. It's out in front of the store, but there is lots of room there for a beautiful display for Christmas. The recommendation, they talk about a comprehensive review and consultation of this city's encroachment policy. Well, to begin with, this patio did not follow the encroachment policy to begin with, Mr. Mayor, and that's another problem I have with this so-called policy. I support the businesses for COVID. I know we have problems. Lots of room for people to eat and drink, and I support that. And I'm just looking at my notes here. We relaxed the rules, and I think because of that, Mr. Mayor, and even if you do go to the encroachment policy, I'm still adamant that should come back to council, because I don't agree with putting patios in front of other businesses' fronts, even though it's a city property. I know all that, in parking spots, I know all that too, but when you block signage from other businesses or residents, I'm not in agree with that unless they have their permission. So basically, I will not be in favor of this recommendation, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further questions?
Your Worship?
Yes.
Just to respond to the council members' concern there through you to Councillor Bagu, I have had a preliminary meeting with staff, both economic development and by law enforcement, about making sure that policy is, this is the city's encroachment policy, specifically as it pertains to these in parking stall type patios, that we do a good sort of staff level debrief in the next couple of weeks, and that we bring back recommendations for any changes to the policy for future, well in advance of the patio season next year. So I do have, the staff on board, and they have committed to making sure that we do that. We don't want to bring something on May 15th or June 15th that applies to the season that starts May 1st or April 1st, whatever council decides. So that decision will be back before council to look at that policy and to sort of debrief, if I can use that word, on the experience we had this year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Louie. Any further questions? I don't see any. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Councillor Bruno, is your hand raised? Or not?
Yes, Your Worship, it is.
Okay, and those opposed? So the motion will be carried. Thank you. Item 9.4, that the Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-287 be received. That a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with the Niagara region at an agreed upon price of $200,000 for 35 King Street be brought forward, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and execute any and all documents respecting the sale of these lands. I have Councillor Wells and Councillor Bagu moving this. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Bram. Bram, do we, I know we don't have a formal or a final concept plan of how that whole area is going to fit in with the waterfront center there, but is there any feeling in regards to the significance of that parcel of land that we're looking at 35 King in relationship to our future plans with the waterfront center?
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. That's a cornerstone piece. Sorry, that's a cornerstone piece of the plans. Right now, there's linkages through that area to H.H. Knoll Park. There's a number of walking. There's 2 different walking lanes that connect the downtown through that area, and we believe that that's a very important part to keep that in the public domain. And we're actually looking at some concept plans today, and it's very central to the overall development of the waterfront center. It won't have a building on it. It'll continue to be used for parkland and public space, but it's very key to that overall development as we move forward.
Councillor Wells?
Thanks, Bram. In addition to that, if the property between that parcel of land and the parcel that's intended for the waterfront center, if we're not successful in obtaining that, I believe it's owned by the Seaway or TransCanada, whichever you want to call them. If we're not successful in securing a lease for those properties or the purchase of those properties, will that reduce the cornerstone value of that property?
Mr. Cotton?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. I don't believe that it will. There's actually 2 different properties between it, but the way that the plan has been created, it's being done in phases, and I don't believe it will. Just because the way that those pathways connect, they'll always connect through there. So those other properties aren't needed for that necessarily. Regardless, I would say that this is a cornerstone property, whether we're able to get leases on those other properties or not.
Councillor Wells.
Thanks, Bram. One last question here. I appreciate the policies that are in place with the region in regards to their disposition of surplus lands. In your negotiations with the region, was there any consideration being given to Port Colborne, who was the former owner of that property, in regards to the pricing on that property? Or was it just what their assessment on that property was as the price? And if you like it, take it. If you don't, then go down the street.
I wouldn't say it was quite so harsh, but I would suggest that they have their disbursement policy and they followed it. And it did come up in discussions that perhaps there was ways to trade it or not, down the road. But at the same time, we didn't want to miss out on the opportunity. Just one quick correction. It actually is former Seaway land when it was sold to the region. It was not City of Port Colborne land, is my understanding when we did future title search or past title searches. It was owned by the Seaway and sold to the region.
Thanks, Bram. Thanks for correcting me on that too, and I appreciate that. That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. In fact, William Hamilton Merritt, who did the original canal, actually owned that piece of property at one time. I saw, I don't know if all of council saw the email from CAO Louis, but it was quite the history because, like you, Counselor, I was under the impression the city owned that small area for our water tower, but no, it wasn't. It was controlled by the city, but part of that Transport Canada. And it didn't sell. I thought it sold back when amalgamation took place, or not when amalgamation took place, when the region was created, but it didn't sell, I believe, until the 1980s. So quite a history lesson on that piece of property. And just one further comment, Councillor Wells, in your question. Because that property is to the west of the Seaway controlled property owned by Transport Canada, we are in partnership with them to utilize that property and keep it as open green space so that we can use it, whether it's canal days, whether it's any other event that the city wants to do, or even a private company that may want to come in and do some type of event. It could be a market, it could be whatever, businesses downtown. It's really opening up that waterfront. So we are continually working with the Seaway with regards to that whole plan. So I thank you for your question. Next is Councillor Baggio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know about the history of that property. I would be very interested in CEO to copy me on that the history of that area there. My question was the same as Councilor Wells about the disposition of the property to the region and back again to us. I was under the impression we sold it for $1 and we buy it back for 200 grand. But my other question was the present new water tower off Barrack Road that the region, I guess, owns. Was that city property? Was that Seaway property, or was that somebody else's property?
CAO?
Who owns the new water tower site on Barrack Road?
Oh, so through your worship to Councillor Baggio, it is owned by the region now. Is the question, who did the region acquire it from?
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
I don't have that information in front of me. I could find it out. I'm not sure if the mayor knows. I know he usually has his finger pretty close to the pulse. It could be a private landowner, or it could have been Young Bunzlauer that owned that land before them. If no one knows,
I believe it was Young Bunzlauer. They purchased it from them for that project.
Perfect. If that's okay, Councillor Baggio, we'll leave it at that. Or if you want, I can confirm it with property tax tomorrow and send you an email to confirm it.
No, I'm happy with that. Just that with city property, we sell it to them for $200,000. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, CAO. I appreciate it.
Great, Councillor. And just through to the CAO, in your email, you had the value that the region paid Transport Canada for that lot back in, I believe, in the 80s. Do you remember that cost that they paid?
Yeah, to your worship, that amount was $55,000 in 1998, which I'm not a realtor or an appraiser, but kind of jibes with a 32 or 33 year appreciation in the value of land. The email that the mayor is referencing was a response to a constituent who had copied both ward councillors on his request. And for that reason, when I replied all, and both council members who were from that ward would have received the request. But now that the mayor has mentioned it, it's probably appropriate for me to send that to all of council so they can follow the chain of events, which includes that blow-by-blow description of the past ownership and the selling price. And I'll do that immediately after the council meeting. Great.
And Councillor Baggio, we did try to buy it for $1. We had lots of negotiations, believe me. Councillor Bodner.
You asked the question to the CAO I was going to ask. Mr. Mayor, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Item 9.5, recommendation that council approve entering into an agreement of purchase and sale, including Schedule B with AJ Callan regarding a city-owned property on Nickel Street legally described as North-South Plan 19, Lot 26, NP 857, that a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement of purchase and sale with AJ Callan regarding the sale of a city-owned property on Nickel Street legally described as North-South Plan 19, Lot 26, NP 857, be brought forward, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign and execute any and all documents respecting the sale of these lands. I have that moved by councilors Bruno and Danch, and I'll go to Councilor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I had a good conversation with Bram this afternoon, and it even added to my feeling of security on this. When I first read the report over the weekend, I looked into the purchase and sale agreement, and it was my recollection that we talked about the conditions as it relates to 172 Mitchell, which is in the purchase and sale agreement, but we talked about registering that on title. I think what we're doing here in the purchase and sale agreement passes the legal test and satisfies us for now, but I'm not so sure in 5 or 10 years when a property comes back up for sale by who knows who owns the adjacent properties on Nickel Street, all that wouldn't show up in a title search, and it would just be the old purchase and the sale agreement from the two parties today. So I would like to ask through you to Mr. Cotton, could we ensure that further to the report that the conditions be registered on title?
Mr. Cotton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, though those conditions that, as discussed, will be registered on title. That is correct.
Councilor?
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 9.6, that the Public Works Department Report 2021-278 be received, excuse me, and that the manager of water and wastewater be directed to apply for disaster mitigation and adaptation funding for the Clark Area Sanitary Sewer Remediation Project. I have that moved by councilors Bagu and Bodner. Councilor Bagu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. This is probably the last one I'm going to talk about. Basically, just a comment. I'm very happy to see our staff being progressive in getting the application for funding for the Clark Area Sanitary Sewer. And as for the residents of the city, we're starting out small. We're making progress. I know that even including myself, I don't like paying my water bill every month either. But we are going to have some more pain than gain. But I just like to thank council and the mayor. Like, we're going forward, and as a priority for constituents to start fixing our leaks a lot better. And I'm really hoping, and I think I'm quite as sure that future councils will also take this as a top priority for the city, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. Any further questions? Okay. Sorry, Darlene. Nobody's asking any questions for you tonight. I don't see any further questions. All those in favor, please raise your hand, and that'll be carried. Thank you, Councilor, and thank you, Darlene. Item number 10.1, Council. This is pulled at the request of the clerk. So I'm going to read the title of the resolution from Niagara Lake, and then I'll let the clerk give a little bit more detail. The resolution is regarding School Board Professional Development Day request for Monday, October the 24th of 2022, which is Municipal Election Day in the province of Ontario. Can I have councilors Bagu and Wells move this? Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair, every 4 years, the year before an election, clerks throughout the province request their local school boards to have PD days on election day, on municipal election day, so that way we can freely use the schools without any security risk or impeding traffic. Port Colborne luckily has the luxury of not needing schools at this time, but I would appreciate the support of this council along with all the other councils in Niagara to request the school board locally does have a PD day on election day of next year, which is October 24th.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So in essence, council, we want to support this recommendation from Niagara on the Lake and make sure that we send a letter to all the people that are included in the letter from Niagara on the Lake and copy their resolution. Is that okay to my mover and seconder, which was Councillor Bagu and Wells? Any questions? All those in favor, please raise a hand. And that's carried unanimously. You're all set with that, Madam Clerk?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Council. Okay, so there are no motions this evening, Council. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none. We have minutes of boards and committees. I'm going to do these in block. We have the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum Board minutes of September the 21st, the Environmental Advisory Committee minutes, August 11th, the Downtown Port Colborne BI minutes, January 13th, February 10th, March 15th, April 19th, May 17th, June 21st, July the 26th, August 9th, and August 30th, all for 2021. If I can have Councilors Bodner and Danch move those. Are there any questions? Excuse me. Any questions regarding any of these? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Perfect. Thank you. Bylaws. This evening we have bylaws 21.1 through to 21.8. Can I have Councilors Bruno and Danch move this? Are there any questions to any of the bylaws? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. We have one confidential item this evening. Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-289, Nyan Energy Lands and the Nyan Tank Farm property to be received. Does any councillor wish to go into in camera? Or as you know, there's a further report to come forward. If we can receive this report this evening, we don't need to go into camera. I don't see anybody wanting to, so I'm going to have Councillors Bagu and Wells move. We receive the CAO report 2021-289. There is no questions on this because it is an in-camera item. All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. And that comes to the end of the meeting, Council. Again, thank you, Council, and we thank everyone that's been watching us from home and those that'll see us on the YouTube channel. Again, remember, please call our customer service reps on the first floor if you need anything from City Hall, or go to our website to report any issue, or contact your local councillor that you see here tonight, or any of the three that aren't here this evening. Again, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.